Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing a fall book recommendations video for y'all today. I would have to say that fall is one of my favorite reading seasons. I feel like it's so cozy. The weather starts getting a little bit crisp, so being able to bundle up and put on one of my little sweaters and read books is one of my favorite things to do, and this is one of my favorite times of year to do so. So I have quite a slew of books, and I tried to pick some from every genre so that anybody watching this video, depending on what your interests are, hopefully there's a book in here for you. I will say overall, my favorite genres to read during the fall are usually fantasy and romance, but a little bit more like heavy romances rather than lighthearted ones. So it would be more romance / lit fic. So I'm thinking that's going to be reflected in the books that I choose today, but I have quite a huge selection. I have about 20 books to go through with you guys. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So the first genre I'm going to be starting off with is fantasy. The first fantasy recommendation that I have is Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. Now, if you know me, you know that this book has me in a chokehold. I just recently read it, and it's what inspired me to do this video in the first place. Just loving story about two characters who are workplace rivals, but in this world of magic and war and theology and so many other things going on, there are a lot of extenuating circumstances that prevent these two from getting together, but they both, unbeknownst to each other originally, are in possession of these two magical typewriters that are linked together. So they start becoming pen pals. One knows who the other is and the other one doesn't, and they communicate, start to fall in love, and it's all about what transpires through their love story. It's just done so well. This is so wholesome, so cozy, but it's a little bit moody. Perfect to read during the fall time when it gets cold, with a little warm drink in your hand, cozied on up. This is such a good fantasy to read. And the next fantasy recommendation that I have specific to the fall is actually the Harry Potter series. Now, I own all of them. I just grabbed my favorite one, which is the third book, which is Prisoner of Azkaban. I would recommend reading the entire Harry Potter series if you haven't, and I personally am planning on rereading it this fall anyways. This is definitely a fall fantasy to me and not a winter one. I think that there is a huge difference between the two and what I like to read in each season. I feel like this is very fall fantasy heavy. The movies, those could be winter. I'll give those to you. But everyone knows what Harry Potter is about. I know this is a little bit of a hot topic, considering the author. I would say I support the work rather than the author, but this is still, I feel, this book is what really, or this series is what really got me into reading in the first place, and I feel like it really changed my life, especially when I read it at the time. I think I read these for the first time in the 5th grade, and I've had these copies of that book since then. Harry Potter, just read it. There's nothing like it. Next one I feel like should come as no surprise if you know me, and that is Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. This is one of my favorite romances of all time, but I specifically think this is such a good book to read in the fall. Again, fantasy I feel like just gets that vibe, but on top of that, this is essentially about a war college, so I feel like that whole back to school era and time frame, I guess, just fits in with this perfectly. And then I feel like you can follow the course of the character throughout her school year as you progress through the school year. So I just think this is such a good fall read. This is one of my favorite books of all time. Such a good time to read in the fall, and might do a reread this fall just because I'm so looking forward to it. The next book that I wanted to recommend, these next couple ones are actually dating a little bit back. I'm not sure if everyone went through the same YA fantasy phase as I did, but I feel like all of these books, kind of similar to Fourth Wing, are just perfect to read during the fall. And the first one that I'm recommending is The Lost Hero, which is the first book in Heroes of Olympus series. And this one is kind of a spin-off of the Percy Jackson series. So if you haven't read that, I would read that first before going into this. But this follows basically a different set of characters. It's like a different set of 5, and their missions are different, but it's essentially the same thing. It takes place in the same world with the demigods and the Greek mythology, and essentially this first book follows Jason, Piper, and Leo. They all have their own backstories and why they ended up finding each other as demigods do in this world, and it's basically their entire journey, and how all the prophecies work in Percy Jackson. It's very similar to that series in terms of the essence of what the story is, but it's just another really good one to read during the fall. So highly recommend this one. And along those same lines, I have Divergent by Veronica Roth. Again, people should know this by now, but just wanted to bring it back on people's radars in case they forgot to reread this, or if they've forgotten about it. This basically takes place in a world where there are 5 factions, and each person and family is grown, like, is designated to a faction. They grow up, and then on choosing day, I think it's called conscription day in this book, they have to choose like what faction they align with. This follows the main character Beatrice, or Triss, and her journey as she has to figure out whether she wants to stay with her family or abdicate from her home faction, and what the consequences of those actions will be and what ends up happening. You soon find out that she is definitely very special and not like everyone else in this world. So if you haven't read this, read it. It's very high stakes, which is why I feel like I associate it with fall, but they don't go to school here, but it's like they join these factions. And so I feel like it gives that same back to school vibe that Fourth Wing does, which is why I think this is such a nice one to read during the fall. And movies don't do the series justice unless you're looking at Theo James the whole time, which is why I watch those movies. But the book definitely deserves its praise. The last fantasy recommendation is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. Now, this is a 5-star read for me. I absolutely loved this book. I just thought it was extremely well done, so well written, and it just was heartbreaking. And I was very, very invested in the story, which is surprising because I usually don't there wasn't much of a plot to the story. I feel like it was more focused on the characters, but there wasn't like a lot happening in the story. And I don't usually gravitate to books like that, but I just feel like this was so well done. It's basically like death comes and grants them a wish, and as anyone does, you have to pay the consequences for making a deal with the devil, essentially. And it's about how these two did that, what happened in their lives that led them to that situation, and then eventually their paths intersect, and it's about how that happens as well. There's a lot going on in this book, and I don't think that this book is for everybody, but I feel like it's so reminiscent of fall. It just gives a sense of magic and nostalgia, and the feeling that I get when I read this book is really similar to walking outside when it's really crisp and taking that first breath of fresh air. That's how I felt when I was reading this book. So I really recommend it to everyone. I definitely think you should give it a try because I think about this book all the time, and I feel like it really impacted me, and I think it's perfect to read during this time of year. Okay, next moving on to mystery thriller genres. I just have 3 books. So the first one is The Reappearance of Rachel Price by Holly Jackson. So basically this follows Belle, who her entire life has just been haunted by the fact that her mom, Rachel Price, disappeared. And eventually she does a documentary where while she's being interviewed, Rachel Price comes back into town 18 years later, and nobody has heard from her, and nobody knows any idea of what has happened. And it's about, is she gonna trust her mom? Is she gonna trust the people that have been there in her life with her this entire time? And it's about that relationship and how that evolves or devolves, if you will. This was so well done. I could not put this down. Read this in one sitting. I think Holly Jackson just has magic with her words. She's also the next recommendation in this video, which is the Good Girls Guide to Murder series. Both of these two together are just, again, mystery thriller, just screams fall. Good Girls Guide to Murder specifically takes place during the time where the main character Pip is in school, so I feel like that's again why that one screams fall to me. But with this one, it's just a little bit eerie, and because you have really no idea what's going on, and I feel like that eeriness and then kind of always looking over your shoulder, it comes back during the fall time. It gets darker faster and it's lighter less long, so I just think it's just so well done. Really recommend this and that book, and I just think Holly Jackson hits it out of the park every time. Such a good fall read. Next book and last book in the mystery thriller category, or I would put this in the mystery thriller category, is the Inheritance Games trilogy by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. So this is the first book, but I would recommend reading all 3. This book essentially follows Avery Grams, who is just like a girl from like a very poor income. She lives with her mom and sister, and she does not have a lot of money, and she's always grown up that way. And one day she gets a letter or like a phone call basically telling her that she has inherited a billionaire's fortune, and she has no idea who this person is, why it would be her that inherited all of this money. And so she has to go to the mansion. She meets the grandsons, I should say, of the billionaire, who are apprehensive of her because they were slated to receive the fortune, and it's about her dynamic with them. And obviously, as one does when they inherit a $1 billion fortune, people are going to come for them. And it's all about, it's mystery, it's games, it's puzzles, it's mazes, it's mind-numbing games, and it's just so well done. It is so high stakes, I think, and just super, super good. Really recommend this one. Jennifer Lynn Barnes is another great, really good YA author that I think hits it out of the park. Next category is romance, and I have quite a few books to go over in this category as well. So the first one I have is The Boyfriend Candidate by Ashley Winstead. Now, this one I feel like I associate with the fall because of the candidate aspect, the political aspect, especially this year. Obviously, we have our election, and so I just associate this with that time of year because of the title, but it also is just a really funny rom-com typical book that looks like this with these like cartoon people on the cover. It basically follows Alexis, who is a school librarian. She is very timid. She doesn't really go out of her box or whatever, and she decides one day she's gonna have a one-night stand, and she has a one-night stand with this guy, Logan, or she attempts to. Eventually, when she tries to have a one-night stand, something happens. They basically part ways, and turns out he's actually running for a position in the local government, and he needs her to be his fake girlfriend, as one does, you know? So it's about their relationship, that story, the dynamic. You get to learn a lot about the two of them. This is, you know, just a typical rom-com, but again, I explained why. I think it's nice to read during the fall, and I think it's well done. You will get exactly what you think you're going to get out of this book, and I think it's a solid romance if you're looking for one. Next recommendation I have is the Knock 'Em Out series. I would say all of them, but specifically this one is very fall-like to me, which is Things We Left Behind. This is the third book in the trilogy. This is a thick book too. All of them are, but this one is just absolutely massive. This one I think was released during the fall time last year, which also is probably why I associated with this time of year, but also it does take place over the course of a few months, fall being one of them, and a lot happens during that time. So I think it's really good, and it deals with some heavy themes in here as well, which just, like I said, I associate with this time of year. Essentially, this follows Lucian and Sloane. I was most looking forward to their story in the trilogy. They were childhood friends, and then something happens that basically splits them up, and then they're enemies as adults, and it's about them finding their way back to each other, navigating their relationships, and trying to protect each other, but in doing so hurting each other. And it's exactly like the other two books in the series in terms of what you're gonna get with them. So yeah, if you're looking for a huge, absolutely massive romance book that has a lot of back and forth and not moving a lot, but at the end will make you happy, this is a good one to go with. Next I have Before We Were Strangers by Renee Carlino. Now this one is an extremely heavy book, and it follows, basically there's past and present timelines in this book, and it follows two characters that met in college, became inseparable, developed a romance. One of them ends up moving away and they lose touch, and then circumstances bring them together in the present day, and a lot has happened since then, and they haven't spoken, and there's a lot that goes on in here. It's just heavy. It's not like it's very triggering, but there's just so much that goes on in there. It's like one of those perfect books. It's cold outside and it's rainy, and you want to feel angsty and you want to feel like there's so much going on in your life. This is the book to read for that one. The Ex-Hex and The Kiss Curse by Erin Sterling. Specifically though, The Ex-Hex, I read this a couple of weeks ago and absolutely ate it up. This was so good, and it's perfect for Halloween. That's when you should read this. It's like two Halloween-y themed books, and it's just so well done. It's giving Halloween Town, but romance. A boy and a girl main character, they had some history, and then they end up parting ways, and then he needs to come back into town, and they both, unbeknownst to the other one, were wrecked by their breakup, and now they have to work together to save the town from utter destruction, as one does in Halloween Town. It's just so well done. It's so magical. It's so cute. It's their town is literally like a town themed for Halloween. So when I say Halloween town, I mean it. It's just so cute, so well done. Binged both of them in one day. Super cute. Highly recommend. Then I have Love in Other Words by Christina Lauren. Childhood friends to lovers to strangers, and then hopefully back to lovers. It essentially follows Elliot and Macy. They are next door neighbors at this house. They fall in love, and then circumstances tear them apart. They don't speak for years, and then they reunite, trying to hash out their past and seeing if they can move forward with the future. It is just so, strikes up that warm feeling in my tummy and my heart, like when you drink hot cocoa. That's the feeling that I get when I read this book. And it is heavy. There are some things that happen in this that makes you just sad, and you just want to be bundled up and warm and cozy in your bed. So I think this is a great one to read during the fall. And the last one is Magnolia Parks by Jessa Hastings. So this is a series, kind of like Gossip Girl. So I feel like that's pretty self-explanatory as to why you would think it is fall, especially it's highly focused on fashion. It's rich kids that live in a super high-class area in London, and it's about all the trials and tribulations you go through. But it takes place like when they're in like a school, and I don't know, I feel like, again, Magnolia Parks is really heavy, and so it's very push-pull angsty, and I just feel like it's one of those romances that can get a little bit tiring, whereas I think some romances are one of those ones that you want more fleeting like fleeting romances. Fall romances are the ones where you're like, okay, I'm gonna be in the thick of it. I want to read this push-pull. I want to read this angst. I want to see what's going on. And that's what you'll get with this book. So that's why I think this is a good romance to read during the fall as well. For memoirs, I would recommend Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zauner. So I own this book, but I basically read it through the audiobook because she narrates the audiobook, and I wanted to hear it from her voice. But this essentially is about Michelle Zauner's life, and how she loses her mom, and she talks about how to navigate that whole feeling of grief when you lose a parent, and how, especially I think with Asian culture, the way that they express love is not just outright saying I love you all the time, but it's through their actions. And it talks about how she realized that and the ways that her mom showed her love. And I think it's a really beautiful book, an homage to motherly love, and I just recommend reading it. It's really sad, but I think it's a really good one to read during the fall. Next, we have Lit Fix. So the first one, please don't judge my absolute disastrous copy of this, but this is Flipped by Wendelin Van Dranen. Literally, you can see the state of this book. I think I've had this book since the 4th grade, perhaps. This is such a comfort book for me. I don't know if you guys have watched this movie or not. This is just so freaking cute. Like, it's just so well done. The feeling that this book gives me is unmatched. And after you guys read this, you should watch the movie too. I desperately need a new copy of this. This is just one of my favorites of all time. This follows Bryce. Bryce moves into this neighborhood when he's a little boy, and there's a peculiar girl, Julie, that lives across the street. She instantly takes liking to him, has a huge crush on him. He does not want anything to do with her because he thinks he's weird, and then navigates how, as you grow up, how your feelings may change. And it's just so cute. Like, just do yourself a favor and read this book. It also takes place during the school year, which is another reason, but just do yourself a favor and read this book if you haven't already. It will just make your whole life, I promise. Next book I have is Tonight We Rule the World by Zach Smedley. This book is actually like heart-wrenching, heartbreaking. I remember absolutely sobbing when I was reading this book. I think I read it maybe 2 years ago. Basically, it follows Owen and Lily as they navigate their relationship, and in real time you basically realize that Owen was sexually assaulted by a classmate, and you have Owen's dad trying to figure out who did it and what happened. And Owen's dad, being a former veteran, he's trying his best to parent Owen but also bringing his demons and his experiences to the situation. And you have Owen desperately trying to protect Lily from hearing about the situation, and then you end up finding out why, and just really heartbreaking. But I think it's so well done, and it's a coming of age story, I would say, that really just talks about how you can deal with and build yourself back up from like a horrible situation and a horrible conflict. I feel like it came at a really good time in my life when I needed to read it. So really, really recommend this one. And the last book, I actually own it, but I forgot to grab it, is Secret History by Donna Tartt. This one is like a dark academia type of book. It takes place at a college over the course of time, but it is dark academia, so I think it's perfect for this time of year. And it basically follows a group of friends that do something that they can't take back, and it's about how they deal with that and how each personality can really change how you deal with the situation. And you also, it's kind of confusing when you're reading it because you come in at the middle of the story and then it takes you back, gives you the backstory, and then you're back in the present and then you go into the future. So yeah, that is The Secret History. And that wraps up my fall recommendation video for y'all today. I know I talked through a lot of books, but I really hope that you guys read these and get into the fall mood. If you do read these, please let me know what you think of them. And if you have any fall recs for me, let me know. I would love to read them. But I will see you guys in my next video then. Take care. Bye.